Welcome to Live from Yancy Street, the sensational She-Geek podcast. I'm doing a second episode this week to cover things that I forgot in my premiere episode. This is going to be much more focused on pop culture and nerd media than just strictly comics that are coming out this week, as I already talked about those, and you can hear that in the first episode. Wherever you're tuning in from, thank you very much for listening. I appreciate all the support. Today's podcast, I'm going to cover mostly some pop culture things. We have the Wonder Woman 84 thoughts, of course, I have to share just like everybody else. And that, of course, the Marvel equivalent, sort of, more or less, being WandaVision episodes 1 through 3. Those first episodes are all up, and I'm going to go ahead and talk about them and my theory of what's going on. And then I want to talk a little bit about Marvel's Women of Marvel #1 special that they have in April. And then maybe some other comic things, and at the end I'll talk about some spotlights on representation that we have in comics this week. I'm going to go ahead and get started talking about my first topic here, which is Wonder Woman 1984. Of course, everybody has to talk about it, so here is what I think. I saw the movie on Christmas Day, as did most other people who watched it, on HBO Max. It was available to view in theaters, but I didn't do that, and not many people I don't think did. My overall thoughts of the movie is that it was fine. I don't think you could really say much in either direction if you're trying to be fair about it. It was fine. I enjoyed it while I was watching it, with a few setbacks, which I'll get into. But for the most part, it was a enjoyable movie. I would say the number one thing that keeps it from being a disappointment, but also keeps it from being what it could have been, is the curse of sequel films. The sequels never being as good as the original, with the exception of possibly Captain America being the only one that hasn't done that. Sequels tend to just not be as good. The first Wonder Woman movie Patty Jenkins made a few years back wasn't perfect by any means, but this sequel doesn't quite live up to it. So it's not disappointing as much as it is predictable. Which is too bad. A lot of people blame that on the writing from Jeff Johns. I don't exactly have a strong opinion on Jeff Johns. I didn't quite experience the traumatic DC Comics experience a lot of people who were reading comics when he was in charge did. But I can understand how a lot of people say that it was his fault the script was bad, because it was his way out of DC. He was on his way out of DC, and we all know many comic creators tend to phone it in on their way from one publisher to another when they know they're finishing a project, etc. You can just look to Brian Michael Bendis' exit from Marvel for more facts upon that. Just to get it out of the way, I'll go over some of the things that stick out in my head strongest about the things I did not like for Wonder Woman in 1984. The first thing that comes into mind is goddamn Steve Trevor. I will probably be mentioning this most times Wonder Woman appears on this podcast as a topic. I don't like Steve Trevor. I feel like he is old news. It would be like having Superman still dating Lana Lang. Let her move on, guys. The first man she ever met. I get the emotional connection, blah, blah, blah. I don't like Steve Trevor as a character. That's my own personal bias. So when they made a big chunk of the movie being about Steve Trevor suddenly being back after he was, in my opinion, mercifully gone at the end of the last movie, it was a little bit of a letdown. And I know that was going to happen. We all knew it was going to happen going into this, but it was still a little iffy. And kind of on that topic, the whole body snatcher thing he did was a little funny, right? It was weird. At first, my partner and I looked at each other and we kind of agreed between us that what happened in that scene, when a stranger walks up to Diana, the camera circles the two of them, and when we go back and see his face, it's Steve Trevor, played by Chris Pine. We had kind of taken that as it's still him, but he's older now, because it's the 80s. It's been, 40 years? That was 40, not 4. I know my history a little bit. But he would have aged. It makes sense. And so we kind of thought it would have been just her remembering what he looked like. You have the memories of a person, but unless they're there with you, you're always going to not really expect what they're like years later if you haven't seen them. That was kind of our opinion of what happened there, and then it came out just a few minutes later that this was actually Steve Trevor's consciousness in an actual other dude's body. That's where it kind of lost me with, well, I mean, even more with the Steve Trevor stuff. I would say my other main critique of the film, that's pretty broad, is what happened to what we heard in Justice League, which was Bruce Wayne giving Diana a hard time about how she, did her World War II stuff, and then she disappeared off the face of the planet for, what they said, like 100 years or something. So our previous understanding of Wonder Woman / Diana Prince's time in humanity is that she did not act as Wonder Woman between Steve Trevor's death in World War II and her time coming back as Wonder Woman in Justice League. That was kind of what we were led to believe. It was very much what we were led to believe. And now we have a movie that's literally Wonder Woman 1984, taking place smack bang in the middle of the period where she's not supposed to be existing as Wonder Woman. I did notice, I think they tried to kind of write that one off a little bit. They tried to trick us a bit. There was a scene in the mall. I think it's also what a lot of people call being a throwback to classic superhero movies, because it was a 1980s mall scene. But in that scene, she's fighting the robbers or whatever the heck it was, and she knocks out the cameras in the mall. And I get the feeling that that was kind of the studio trying to do, nudge, nudge. Hey, see, she wasn't active for 100 years because there was no evidence. That's a weak excuse, guys. I think we all know that that's weak. And I really would have preferred that they gave us an actual explanation to the lack of continuity there. I could get into more particular gripes about acting and script and dialogue, and just reiterate again how weird it was that Steve Trevor kind of body snatched some random guy and we never found out what happened afterwards. But it's those are my main gripes. It's the Steve Trevor-ness of it all and the lack of continuity. There's faults of the acting and faults of the dialogue and clear faults of the script. But to avoid kind of harping on it so much, I'm now going to talk about the things that I did enjoy, because that's what I believe the script should have focused on more. And basically what I did enjoy was absolutely anything that touched on Amazons or Amazonian history or absolutely anything to do with the Amazon tribe of women. We see in the beginning, of course, Diana going back and fighting in some kind of test, and she goes and she tries to cheat to win, and she gets the whole talk from her trainer and her mother, and everybody tells her, Diana, you're wrong for doing that. That whole scene, absolutely beautiful. So well done. You get the Amazons in their perfect costumes, unlike the shameful Justice League cop-outs that we got there. And the acting was superb. That little girl who played Diana did an excellent job playing what I believe a young Diana should be like. All around great scene. I would say adding into that would be the invisible jet scene. It was something that I think everybody really hoped was going to be in this movie after it wasn't in the last one. And we weren't really sure how it was going to happen. I kind of myself hoped it would be something semi-magical, and I ended up being pretty pleased. It was, I guess you would call it, an Amazonian trick, an Amazonian kind of magical thing that they do. I'm not sure if it's more spiritual or technological. My guess is it's more magic spiritual based, because she didn't have anything on her to do that. It was just her doing it, which is pretty damn cool if you ask me. That scene was really sick, having her turn the airplane that she and Steve were riding in invisible as they were riding in it. That was awesome. And that was actually probably the second to best payout of the whole, well, one of the best payouts. We'll just say one of the best payouts of the whole movie was finally seeing the invisible jet come to fruition. Very nice feeling. I would add on to that also anything that involves the armor Diana wore. It was I don't recall her name, but it was the mythical ancient Amazonian warrior who fought back the world of men so that her Amazon sisters could escape to Themyscira. And she was never seen again. And so, of course, as soon as they tell that story, we're gonna hear something more about her later on in this movie. But in the meantime, Diana wears her armor, which is the beautiful golden armor she wears to fight Cheetah, which we see in all the promos. And it was theorized that Cheetah was really gonna screw up Wonder Woman's body physically in a fight, and that's why she goes to that armor, which is kind of where it comes from. I don't think she really got messed up in a fight with her till after that point. The true Cheetah didn't come out till after her golden armor was on. So, and Cheetah herself, I'm sidelining from the Amazon stuff for a second, but Cheetah herself was pretty cool. I think they did fairly good on her motives. They did that really well. The jealousy that kind of turns, the love that turns to jealousy that turns so sour it becomes hatred. They captured that pretty well. The cheesy outfit thing in the beginning, I kind of had to ignore. They had her wear that stupid animal print outfit for a little bit too long, a little bit longer than I would have liked. I would have rather it wasn't there at all. But overall, Cheetah was great, and Kristen Wiig clearly did the best possible job with the script that she was given. Heading back to the Amazon things, like I was saying, every little bit of scene, every time they talked about the suit Diana was wearing and every time she wore it, it was really good, and that just falls more into the Amazon topics that they did well on. And the last one that I can think of off the top of my head was the end scene. That's not the final scene, that's the end credit scene. As I said before, they had mentioned that ancient Amazon warrior who fought back the world of men and was never seen again. Of course, we were all going, yes, I want to see her, she's going to appear in this movie. Credits happened, I was momentarily very disappointed. It kind of felt like they put this beautiful red carpet out for her to walk out on, and then she didn't show up. But, lo and behold, we get her in the end credits scene. And, of course, the woman who is playing this ancient Amazon is none other than Linda Carter, the original live-screen Wonder Woman. If you can't tell, that was the scene that got me a little bit broken up. Linda Carter is an icon for so many reasons, and a inspiration, and an all-around good person. As far as I can tell, she is someone who has been in the spotlight for decades now and has remained being a genuinely good person. So it was really nice to see her kind of make the full circle there and be that ancient Amazon that we all kind of know that she is. So that's my general thoughts on the Wonder Woman 1984 movie. It's kind of equal with the good and the bad. I like to lean towards there being more good and give it more of the benefit of the doubt, just because this is a superhero movie and that's my nature as a fan of superheroes. Now we're going to go ahead and move on into WandaVision, which is the other side of the spectrum as far as what do you want to call it, programs go. Let's just go with that. WandaVision episodes 1 through 3 are now up on Disney+. If you haven't watched them and plan to do so without getting it spoiled, don't listen to this, because I'm going to talk all about it. Before I get too far into this, if you do hear a weird tinkling noise in the background, that is rain on my roof. But let's go ahead and jump on into my theories on this. Basically, just flat out, my theory is that Wanda is doing this out of self-defense. We know in House of M, which is probably the closest equivalent to the comics version of this that we've ever seen, and this is probably the closest equivalent to a live-action House of M we'll ever see. I can't see them doing this twice with Wanda. Wanda rewrites the entire world to be what she wants it to be her ideal life. So, knowing that, I believe what Wanda has done in WandaVision is that she has reacted to a threat by taking this neighborhood back into the past with her, the way that you would see it in idealized shows from the whichever decade she's in at the moment. I think that the person who's probably attacking her is probably someone from AIM. My best guess is Arnim Zola. He's technically dead, yes, in the MCU, but Arnim Zola's whole thing was he wanted to create bodies that you could put a consciousness into. That's literally his whole thing. He's a mad scientist, and that's his shtick, is I want to have a fake body that it's ideal and I can put myself in it. It's why he looks so funky. It could also be MODOK, if we're talking AIM. There's a couple people it could be. There's a theory that it's Sunspot. There's no way it's Sunspot. Sunspot's an X-Men and he's not a villain, although he does own AIM at a point where it's a long story. But anyway, the reason that I think it's AIM is because in episode 2, a character comes up from a manhole who is dressed as a beekeeper surrounded by a swarm of bees. And Wanda sees this, immediately recognizes it as the threat that it is, and literally undoes the time. She rewinds the past few minutes until it's back at the safe time before that to prevent that from even having happened. And the AIM thing comes from the beekeeper suit, because AIM soldiers / scientists, whatever you want to call them, are often called beekeepers due to their suits. Their look is very beekeeper-like. She's, every time that she sees any of this stuff that is encroaching on her perfect world, a little bit more of reality starts to unveil itself in the form of modernizing bits and pieces of her world. As the world modernizes, that's really everything in her world starting to remember what's real and getting closer and closer and closer to reality. So it's going to be interesting to see how she starts reacting when they start getting so much closer to that reality and things aren't so easy to keep rewinding and pushing away. We saw in episode 3 that she can even do this with Vision. Vision starts to remember that really tragic stuff happened between them and their friends and their fellow heroes, and he tries to mention it, and she snaps her fingers and just completely undoes it. He doesn't remember what he was saying. He's happy like nothing of that ever happened. There's a few more moments again in the first episode when she's at, I think it's the second episode actually, when she's at the neighborhood luncheon. The voice on the radio that speaks to Wanda says, "Who's doing this to you, Wanda?" So I definitely think that this neighborhood is a self-defense reaction for Wanda, and whoever is attacking her or trying to attack her is from AIM. Now, the other entity that we know is in this program is SWORD. I was going to say SHIELD. SWORD is the new SHIELD, basically. SWORD, there's the whole thing in the comics is basically that the SHIELD watches the Earth and SWORD watches the space, or skies, whatever you want to say. It's kind of seems to be they're doing it more just SHIELD is picking up the fallen pieces. Sorry, SWORD is picking up the fallen pieces of SHIELD's broken shield. And so we're seeing Monica Rambeau. We've already met her. Her name was, I think, Geraldine or something like that in the neighborhood. She couldn't recall who she was because I'm pretty sure as soon as they sent her into the neighborhood, Wanda's magic rewrote her memory. And then when she starts questioning it too much, there's not actually that much magic holding it up. There's not enough to have there be a backstory for her to access. So she doesn't even know when they question who she was. And that's why she had that necklace on to remind herself to ground her. And that's why when she gets shot out of the world from Wanda, again, her being self-defensive, she is in Monica, winds up outside with a bunch of military-looking vehicles. And we get a tiny little glimpse of this dome around the neighborhood that Wanda's created. I thought that was honestly really cool. We have 3 more episodes of the sitcom-style show ahead of us. Now, we know that sitcom-style episodes have been ending with slight teases to what we're going to see outside of the sitcom world that she's built, like that bit of Monica getting pushed out. So I'm really hoping, we know that Darcy from the Thor movies is going to appear in this, so I'm assuming that once we get to that 7th episode, we're going to start seeing more of these other characters who we know are in the show but have yet to really come forward. One other thing that I saw as a theory online that's very popular, the woman, I don't recall her name, who was in charge of the neighborhood meeting that Wanda went to in episode 2, there's some good theories about who she is, and the most guesses are either Mephisto, because she says something along the lines of the devil is in the details, and they think that that's just up Mephisto's alley to be coming in here and nosing around to see what's going on, or, my personal preference, Clea. Clea is a half-Faltine sorceress. She is the sorceress supreme of the Dark Dimension, and she is the former wife/lover of Doctor Strange. She's also formerly his student, but she kind of overcame needing him as a teacher and kind of became a boss-ass bitch herself. I would love to see Clea enter the MCU in this way. The reason that people theorize Clea is because her hair is probably exactly what they would have to do for Clea's hair in the MCU. And again, if you hear noises in the background, that is my cat. So I would really love for that to be Clea. I'm a big fan of Clea, and I'm a big big fan of Clea being her own person, so if she gets introduced outside of a Doctor Strange movie, woohoo! I'm all for that. Let's see, some other theories that I have. Well, really, I think the last part of the theory that I have here, the only thing that I haven't touched on, is her twins. Now, the twins that are born are Billy and Tommy, which are the names of her children in the comics that she creates for herself. It's a long story in the comics. They're alternate reality. It's a long story. But in WandaVision, it seems that one of them wanted Billy as the name, and one of them wanted Tommy. So when she gives birth to the baby, and Vision offers to name the baby the name that she wanted, she kind of initiates a twin, because she wants him to be happy too, and that's why she ends up with Billy and Tommy, so they're both happy. And my theory on them, based on the song that she sings, the lullaby that she sings the two twins on the night of their birth, is that they're going to grow up by the end of the sitcom, and they're going to be the two Pietros, the Foxmen and the MCU Pietro. I can't remember the actors' names, but one of them is confirmed as to being in the show, and the other, Aaron Taylor Johnson, I would not be surprised if he popped up as well, because he didn't get too much in his MCU moment before he got killed, so. But that is really my theories of the show. I think I covered everything. I covered the kids. I think they're gonna be the two versions of Pietro that we've seen, just to make it extra trippy, pull on the Fox stuff, because blow our minds, Disney, do it. We covered the sword being the entity that is working with Monica, and that's why Monica's there. We covered Clea / Mephisto, but let's hope Clea. I understand the one from Mephisto, I truly do, but I feel like there's probably a better way to get him in here than this. I feel like this is probably a more clever way. And then we covered the undoing any part of the world she doesn't like, the AIM stuff, the Zola stuff, the Beekeeper stuff. I think that's everything. That's all of my theories for WandaVision. My opinions, though, is that this is a really fun show. I had a lot of critiques that I heard after the first 2 episodes premiered simultaneously, because people I guess they didn't like that it wasn't quite as fantastical as we're used to seeing MCU properties. The last property that we saw for the MCU was Endgame, and that had everybody in it. That had, mind explosions kind of stuff going on. This is a much more laid back kind of thing, but I also think that the details that are important are going to be a lot more important as we get into the non-sitcom episodes. And as we get closer to those episodes, I'm getting more and more excited to see the truth of this. We can all have our theories. I have my theories that I would really, really love to have come true. So I guess my main hope with the series going forward is that whatever ends up being real is better than my theories. It's the best that I can hope for. So then also over on the Marvel side of things, was just announced on the 21st of January, so only a couple of days ago. In April, Marvel is going to put out a one-shot creator celebration of women that is called Women of Marvel #1. The Women of Marvel podcast is fairly well known and very well appreciated by those who do listen to it. I know that I enjoy it when there's my cat. I know I do enjoy it when I get a chance to sit down and listen to it myself. And now it looks like they are doing stories about various women of the Marvel Universe. Now let's see specifically what that is. We have a She-Hulk adventure. We have a Captain Peggy Carter, his story. A Marrow story, who I'll be honest, Marrow is the one in here who I don't know who she is. We have a Hell's Kitchen Elektra story, it looks like. We have a story about Rogue and Mystique, which says it'll be a revelation, and a few others. And the creators who we have on this issue, it's one of the they kick the women of the female fans of Marvel Comics. They kick us a bone every now and then, every couple of years. Fearless was a few years ago. Things like Marvel Divas, I'm an Avenger, things like that. They throw us a bone with these female-based things every now and then to keep us happy. But the creators listed on this issue include Louise Simonson, Nadia Shamas, Elsa Sjörensen, I definitely pronounced that wrong, Sophie Campbell, Natasha Alterici, Anne Toole, and even artists such as Kay Zama, Elorana Carlini, Skylar Patridge, and Joanna Estep, and many more. I don't recognize a lot of these names, I will say, but the ones that I do recognize is very good signs for the issue. Obviously, Wheezy Simonson, nobody needs to explain her effects on comics over the past several decades. Many decades. So that alone is probably enough to get people to pick this up. I am very excited. As I said, that Marvel throws us these bones, but in all seriousness, I do like it when they do this. I wish it was more, but I do like it when they give it to us, finally. And finally, I was planning on talking about some of the announced releases for April, aside from that Women of Marvel #1 issue. But now that I have kind of gone over it all a little bit, I think the best thing here that I would like to talk about is I would like to reiterate my this week's spotlights on representation that I do for comics. I do every week. I try to do at least 3, one for women of comics, one for people of color in comics, and one for queer topics in comics. Some kind of spotlight on one of each of those things that kind of puts a headlight to what I feel is important to remember and back up in comics and the comic industry. So I'll start. The first one I have this week is Mariko Tamaki writing Dark Detective. It's the second Dark Detective issue alongside Dan Mora on art. Mariko Tamaki is fairly well known for her young adult graphic novels, as well as some of the work that she's done in the industry in the past couple of years. I myself first encountered her in her 2016 run of Hulk and She-Hulk comics. The name switched over halfway through, and that followed Jennifer Walters down a path we had never really seen her on before, which was her having to stop for a minute and take into account that she has been through an ordeal, and that sometimes takes work. You have to work on yourself as much as you have to work on your physicality. So Mariko Tamaki, a woman in comics, and an Asian American woman in comics, who is writing Batman right now with Dark Detective, and after Future State she will be writing Detective Comics, I believe is what it is. She'll be writing Detective Comics as the ongoing writer there. She just finished her Wonder Woman run. Can't say I was too much of a fan of it, to be completely honest, but I do also feel like every element of that run that I did not like was something I feel like was being pushed by DC, which I have a whole conspiracy theory about, but that doesn't really matter right now. Moving along, Other History of the DC Universe by John Ridley. We saw the first issue of that about, it feels like it's over a month ago now. Probably was more like 2 months ago now. John Ridley, of course, being the Oscar-winning writer for the movie 12 Years a Slave. He is now taking his writing talents to Marvel and DC. He'll be in Marvel Voices in a couple of months here, I think, as one of their main writers, but for now he's doing the Other History of the DC Universe. The first issue was phenomenal. It was a work of art, to say the least. In this issue, it is going to be following the story of the original Teen Titans, but instead of the normal perspective everybody is known and used to for them, it's going to be giving it the perspective of the black superheroes who were on the team, who was Mal Duncan and Karen Beecher Duncan. Karen Beecher Duncan, better known as Bumblebee, and she's of the two the one that I'm slightly more familiar with, although to be honest, I am not really familiar with this era of comics. I do have to say, the Other History of the DC Universe is starting to feel like a trend that I've been seeing in entertainment media, a positive trend in my opinion. Take the show Lovecraft Country, for example. It takes place in the 1940s. Well, was it the 1940s? It takes place during the Korean War, wasn't it? It takes place during the Korean War. And so we have a Korean War veteran who returns home and deals with life, basically everything that life brings after that. We as a society are used to seeing these movies from a white perspective, from a white male perspective. Easily 65% of Lovecraft Country was told from a black female perspective. The other percentages were all from a black man. Seeing the country portrayed from their perspective and that era gives it a completely different story than the story we've always been told of what America was like during that time. I don't know about a lot of people, but I, for one, am certainly a believer in representation. This is why I'm talking about this now. But I truly believe that that is the next big step for cinema and for entertainment, is to... We've seen all these stories. People complain about how there's no new stories. Fine, then tell the stories from a different perspective, because when you do that, you get a completely different history. I think it's really interesting, and I'm very happy that DC is letting John Ridley put out these beautiful magazine format comics. Next we have Monstrous. They are finally returning for issue 31 after being gone for, I believe, 3 or 4 months. I am absolutely in love with everything about Monstrous as a series. The creators are Marjorie Liu and Sana Takeda. They are 2 Asian American women. Well, Marjorie Liu is actually Japanese, I have them backwards. Sana Takeda is Japanese, Marjorie Liu is Asian American. Together they have built one of the single most incredible comic experiences I've ever seen. I've ever gone through. It's, in short, Monstrous is a female Asian lesbian society. It's all done with a very, very strong Asian twist. I would recommend this for anybody who's into manga, trying to get into comics, or standard comics, I guess I would say. But it is a matriarchal society. It took me probably the first volume to really realize there weren't any male characters. And it took until one of the more recent issues for them to really respond to that as being a concern in the society. Clearly was not something these women creators were concerned with dealing with, what the men were up to. But just to address it, they did answer the question of reproduction in that they don't need men for reproduction. It turns out that during their moon, which I take as their period, these women of this world can impregnate one another. That shit's awesome. Just take men out of the equation altogether. There are male characters in Monstrous, and the ones who are there, for the most part, there are some really amazingly good characters who are male. They're good people, they are progressive to the story, but for the most part, Monstrous is a matriarchy, and most of the characters are female. This means that all the leaders are women. Everything is led from a female perspective. It's such a nice, refreshing breath of fresh air, in a very, very male-led community. So Monstrous is one of them, and then the last one I want to talk about here in my spotlights on representation is the new Future State Aquaman issue that's coming out this week. And that is integral because it not only has a black lead and a female lead, but it is 2 leads who are also queer. And that's written by, let me see, I have it down here. That is written by Brandon Thomas, who is a black man himself, and Daniel Sempere, who I hope I'm pronouncing that right. What I have to say about this, basically, is that this is probably the book that I'm most excited about that's coming out tomorrow, because you have Andy Curry, who we already know is a queer woman because of her relationship with a non-binary character from the Justice League Future State issue. If you picked up on that, they're clearly dating. It was a pretty cute little scene of them hand-feeding each other popcorn. And so she's and then of course, if you don't think that that's queer enough for you, the editor of this issue has come out to confirm, yes, Andy Curry is a queer woman. And she, of course, is the daughter of Arthur and Mara, the rulers of Atlantis. As it stands in the Future State Justice League issue, she is Aquawoman, while her parents are just kind of in Atlantis, it seems, so good for them. And the other character who this is going to be involving is going to be Jackson Hyde. Jackson Hyde is the, I guess you would say, comics version of Calder, who is Aqualad from Young Justice. Aqualad, he's a black Aqualad. I believe he was the first black Aqualad in any kind of comics format for DC, and he caught on so well with Young Justice that they translated him over to the comics as Jackson Hyde. I'm not sure how much he's appeared, if really at all, but I'm really excited to see him here because he is a queer character as well. Calder from Young Justice, in their recent Outsiders season of the series, it was revealed that he is queer, has a boyfriend, so it makes sense that Jackson Hyde as well is also super queer. I'm not really sure. For those who are also curious, I'm using the term queer because it's not really confirmed if he's bisexual, if he's gay, if Andy's omnisexual or pansexual, or if she considers herself something else. So saying queer is just kind of like a catch-all. They're like hella gay, but like not really. Moving on from that. Those are the reasons that Future State Aquaman is my number one pick this week that I'm most excited for. It's a solid creative team, and it's some really, really much needed representation from DC Comics. And that just wraps it about up for my second podcast. I think I'm going to call this 1.5. If anybody actually gets this far to listening, thank you for being here with me, and let me know what format you prefer. Last week, or I guess Friday, I spoke a lot about comics that I had read and reviewed, and comics that are coming up this week. And on this podcast, I talked more about pop culture. There's always something film, nerd, pop culture related, somewhat comics related to talk about. So we covered Wonder Woman and WandaVision, which will be ongoing for the next 7 or so weeks, I think. So let me know which one you prefer most, what you like to hear me talk about more, my theories, just a general gist of what's going on in the industry, or what's going on in a certain story, or just say, hey, I would love to have any kind of feedback and get a good idea of people who are listening. And once again, if you didn't make it this far, again, thank you, and I hope you have an excellent week. Tomorrow is New Comic Book Day for DC, Wednesday is always the rest of them, so pick up some comics from your local comic shop, never go to Amazon, and have a nice week. Stay sweaty.